So, what was about a month or so ago, you and I met each other, didn't we? We know each other professionally, but then we met each other in that club. And
that was really cool.
It was so weird.
Yeah.
It was like, because I went there and I had this self-doubt. As I pulled up and I parked in the car park, I had this moment of self-doubt, and I thought to myself, what am I doing here? Like, why am I going to this club? Like, I've just left my dog at home at 11 o'clock at night, and I'm going out raving on my own, sober raving on my own. And I thought, what am I doing? And then I walked onto the dance floor and I saw you, and then I was like, is that Michelle?
I was the same with you as well. You know when you're not sure, because you've normally got your glasses on as well.
Yeah.
And I was like, is that him or not?
Yeah.
Is it?
Yeah. And you obviously not. You had dark hair the last time I saw you, so that threw me even more. And then so then I saw you and I thought, do I know her from the past, or is somebody I know now? And then I was like, no, I'm sure that's Michelle. And then it was you. And then we just had a really nice evening.
It was wicked.
And then
I
we
really
had a good
enjoyed
chat
it
on the way back. And all about synchronicities and stuff. And I just thought you'd be a great person to have on the podcast.
Thank you. For me, like we're in recovery and that, like that synchronicity stuff is kind of what really keeps me alive and thriving for more. Yeah. And makes me want to go for like looking more at my own self, my awareness around things. Yeah. And what I've found is, especially at the minute, like working with like really chaotic clients, I'm so sucked into the madness all the time at the minute. There's only a few moments out of that. Yeah. And so when them moments happen, makes me want more of them. Yeah. Yeah.
And what do those moments feel like when you get them?
Like I'm exactly where I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be in that moment. Yeah. And like everything fits into place and everything's as it should be. Yeah. And I feel at peace. Don't have any like obsession going on around anything. I feel sure in myself. All the bits, like the connection, I guess. Yeah.
Absolutely the same.
Yeah.
That was well explained.
Okay,
It
cool.
was very well explained. I couldn't have explained it that well myself. Cool.
Funny.
Well, welcome to the Life in Recovery podcast. We're already recording. I've recorded quite a bit of it, so that's a good intro. So I'm looking forward to hearing your story. I mean, I know that you're from Nuneaton, aren't you?
Yeah.
So let's hear it. What was life like growing up, and where did it all go wrong?
Wow. Okay. So, like I'm the eldest of four. My parents were together my whole childhood, although they had quite a turbulent relationship. My dad was a businessman and a drinker, and he'd like binge of a weekend and some evenings and that, and he was quite a controlling man. My mum was really timid and quiet and loving, really a homely woman, but she used to work a lot. And at a certain point, I remember like my mum being really ill, and she was off in hospital for I'm not sure how long for. I don't know how long for. And during that time, I would care for my brothers and sisters, and I remember like coming home like from school and things like that, and being really scared of when my dad would come home. Like my dad he didn't know how to manage his emotions, and it would come out sideways with us kids. And I knew he was like really stressed with my mum and stressed about earning enough money to keep the family going and things like that. But he would be really angry most of the time. And but alongside that, he had these two sides to himself. He had like this other side where he'd be really loving and caring, and he'd sit me down, and from as way back as I can remember, he used to sit me down to like write goals for myself. And so from like, I just remember from as way back as I could write, him sort of sitting down and saying, what do you want to do when you're older? Yeah. And what do you want to do this year? What do you want to do this week? Things like that. And I remember out of nowhere wanting to go travelling to Australia. I didn't know anyone in Australia. I'd never seen a programme on it or anything like that, but it just came into my head that I wanted to go to Australia. Another thing that I wanted to do was be a hairdresser and have my own business. So they were like my 3 long-term goals. And then like short-term goals, I used to have little hobbies. And so I used to play the keyboard, I used to play football, I used to play golf, things like that really. And then every time I'd take on a hobby, what would happen is, like with my dad, I feel really silly saying this because it's quite privileged, like, to have all that stuff. But I remember like my dad like making me practice every single day for hours, and to the point where I wouldn't want to do it anymore. And I remember like my keyboard, I'd be playing on my keyboard and I scratched all the keys and like, you know, ruined it, things like that. I'd get to a point where I just didn't want to do it anymore, and the only way I could do it would be like through rage. I'd get this rage and I'd smash it up. Or like with the golfing, I used to play golf and we used to have a long garden, and I remember playing out in the garden with the golf clubs and like smashing a tree up, things like that, because I just didn't want to play anymore. And
so it wasn't letting you just enjoy it?
No.
Was he
like
was he kind of like driving you to be like the best
perfect.
at it, be perfect? Yeah.
So I remember at one point I played the piano, and as a child I don't think I really understood his humour, and I was in a concert, and I remember before this concert he sat me down and he says, right, if you played perfectly you can have your ears pierced, right? Now I played that like piano and I really thought, oh, I've done a really good job there. And after I came out, he turned around and he says, well, you missed one note, so you're only having one ear pierced. Now that, like, as a child, I didn't understand. And so I got this thing inside where I thought I was not good.
Yeah.
And
I'm not good enough.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that kind of, I remember that feeling quite a lot. Like I used to dance and things, and I remember, like I remember back then having this. I'd get this real shy thing come up when I'd do anything in public. I'd get really nervous, and I remember dancing as well on the stage, and I think I left the stage like a second later than the rest of the children or something like that, and then that also brought in this like feeling that I hadn't done it good enough, things like that. And so I had that from a young age, whether that was myself or whether that was partly through conditioning with my family, I'm not sure, but I had that going on from
it's shame, isn't it? Really, the way it manifests itself, or it sounds like the way it manifests itself is shame.
Yeah.
I relate to that. You know, as soon as you said it, I related to it.
Yeah, so that's kind of like how I was in childhood. And I remember as well, like first school, not really mixing with children much, or feeling quite secluded from everybody at school. And then the times when I would really be okay is when I was out playing in the fields, like on rope swings, running around the fields, anything to escape really. I struggled being in the house, I struggled being in school with other people. When I was out doing my own thing, I was fine.
Yeah.
And so that kind of carried on, that carried through. And when my mum was well enough to come home and she was back in the family home, I just became really rebellious. And like my dad used to make beer and wine and things, and he had a shed in the garden with all different kegs of things in there. And I remember just going in and filling up Coke bottles and going, like, getting my best mate round, and we'd just get wasted and just make a show of ourselves. So I think it started with the drink, and then within a couple of years it had like progressed onto like gas and weed and things like that. I was just sort of experimenting, I suppose.
Yeah.
And
what was up with your mum then? What was the illness?
so she had breast cancer.
Oh, okay.
She fully recovered.
Yeah.
So she fully recovered, but she had breast cancer. And
how long was she away for then? Was she in hospital?
probably, I'm not totally sure. It's a bit hazy in my mind, but I think probably a few months or a month or two. I'm not sure. But I know she was ill running up to that, and when she came out, and as well when she had my little sisters who were 7 years younger than me, she had a hysterectomy, so she wasn't able to do loads after the hysterectomy. So there was like 2 moments really close next to each other where I remember just having to do a lot more than usual. And yeah, I think it was like when I was talking about doing the hobbies and it was quite enforced, I just remember it being like I had to do this stuff because my dad was telling me I had to do this stuff, and I felt really closed in.
How old were you then?
Well, my sisters are 7 years younger than me, so it would have been from about then onwards, I suppose. Yeah.
What? How old are you? 7?
I would have been 7. Yeah.
So that's really young, isn't it, to have that type of responsibility?
I think probably like for a couple of years, something like that.
Yeah.
I'm not sure. It might be a little bit different to that, but it's around
still
that
really
age.
young though, isn't it? Like under 10, 11 is like even that age is like really young to take on responsibility. So it's no wonder that you felt like that.
Yeah. So yeah, it was a bit like that. And then I remember like when I went up to high school. So my mum and dad had taken me to a psychiatrist when I was really young because I was so shy and quiet in school, but I was a real tearaway outside of school, and I would be, like I said earlier, like running around a lot. And I remember just refusing to go back to this psychiatrist, like I wouldn't go back. And when I went up to high school, I've just sort of my personality changed, I suppose. Like I had a bit of a personality change, and I started hanging out with people that were quite sarcastic and like egging each other on to do silly things and all that sort of stuff. And like from whatever age high school is, maybe around 12, I was stealing. I was stealing out the teachers' handbags. I was stealing from shops. Yeah, all that sort of stuff, really.
I did that too.
Did you really?
Not out of teach sandbags, but I did out of shops, yeah. I don't even feel like, it's funny when you just said it, because I just thought, God, yeah, I did that. But I never, at the time, I just thought it was all just fun. Do you know, it's just like, we were all doing it, like nicking ice pops out of the local shop and sweets and all that kind of stuff. But not everybody does that.
No, they don't. And you know what? This was really traumatic for me, actually. I remember my dad finding a stash of hairspray and things like that I'd stolen. And I'd stolen for other girls in my class. And they'd say, oh, hold on to them, and when we want them, we'll give them back. Like, come and drop them off to us or whatever. My dad had found my stash. And he marched me into school. He took me to the police station and asked the policeman to show me around the cells. And then he took me into the school and he called all the girls' parents in as well. And we all had to have a meeting about this stuff. And I weren't allowed to hang out with them girls anymore. And they were all the cool kids at school. And so from that day I was again secluded. And he grounded me for a year.
Oh my God.
Yeah. And it was, oh God, it was pure hell. I remember at Christmas we all went away like as a family and all of our other close family friends, like my godbrothers and sisters and things like that. And on the Christmas day everyone's opening their presents and my dad wouldn't let me open my presents. And this is like a couple of months later down the line after that. And what happened? I think, so I was crying my eyes out on Christmas Day and my dad like just gave me a slap and he was like, Michelle, you've done this to yourself, you know. And so like I would just remember like just wanting to get away even more.
More rebellion.
Yeah.
It's funny, isn't it? Because I was just thinking of, you know, like how incarceration doesn't work. It's like rehabilitation instead of incarceration. That's like a year's incarceration, isn't it?
Totally.
Oh my God.
Totally. So yeah, I was just a bit...
Do you know what's also funny? My partner got caught. She did the same thing when she was younger, did a bit of shoplifting. And when her parents found out, all her dad said to her was, "I'm really disappointed in you."
That's
And
worse.
that was it. That's worse, yeah. And that was
That
it.
would have stopped
She never
it.
did it ever again. That was the end of it for her.
It would have been the end of it for
I
me
know,
as well.
yeah.
I'd have, yeah.
Yeah, those words. I'm disappointed. That's it, isn't it?
Yeah.
Nobody wants the parents to be disappointed in them.
Yeah, because
Yeah.
despite all that stuff, it was my dad's love that I craved the most.
Yeah, of course, yeah. And that's a boundaried way of showing love, isn't it? Saying I'm disappointed, because then it really makes you think, oh God, like what I've done is wrong. Whereas when you're just told, right, you're not going out for a year, you think, poor me.
Totally. Full of self-pity.
Yeah, yeah. And
I
that
really
festers
was.
for a year, and then it's like, right, what are we going to do now?
I really was. And do you know what? As soon as I started getting out after that, I'd just disappear for days and I wouldn't come home. And by 15, I'd made a decision to leave my family home, and I went and stopped in some dodgy shared house, and I lasted there about 3 months before I crawled home and said, okay, I'm ready to toe the line, which I wasn't, but I just weren't really able to cope outside of that family unit. And
how was your dad reacting to stuff like that?
Really badly.
Yeah.
Yeah, really badly. Like
a lot of arguments and stuff.
Yeah, it was really turbulent. So I think with me and my dad, we had, out of probably all my brothers and sisters, probably had the strongest bond with me and my dad out of all my brothers and sisters. Like his friend used to call me Little John. Like he used to take me to football, he used to take me to the golf course, he used to, he used to do lots of things with me when I was really young, before my brothers and sisters were born. And so I guess there's that as well, that like real strong bond. But also probably a lot of expectations, and I don't think I could live up to them expectations, and it just got a little bit messy along the way. And
expectations are dangerous.
Yes. Yeah,
very dangerous.
Definitely. So yeah, that's kind of how my childhood was, really.
Yeah.
Bit turbulent.
Yeah. So you started drinking.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I remember like stealing whiskey out of the cupboard. And this is really awful, but my brother used to get the blame for it, and I'd let him get the blame. Like
awful but funny.
Basically, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh dear. So yeah, I think I was very dishonest, very selfish, and just out for myself, really. Didn't really care, just wanted what I wanted and sod the family. I weren't really interested in the family relationships. I avoided being there as much as possible. And I always felt hard done by. Like my friends would be allowed out and I wouldn't be allowed out. And if I did go out, I'd have to be back at 10 and they'd be allowed back at 12 and all that sort of stuff. So I was just very... I
had all that.
Yeah. Did you?
Yeah.
Yeah. So yes, that's kind of it. And then by the time I'd finished school, I'd like experimented with a few drugs. I went off to do my hairdressing apprenticeship. I got a job within a week of leaving school and trained up to be a hairdresser, and I put my all into it. Like I tried really hard with that job. I was like really good. I was really creative. I was really like driven, and I did really well with my hairdressing. And during that time, like I was only earning about 40 quid a week or something like that. And I used to give my dad rent, either 10 or 20 quid a week, depending on what I could afford. And I thought that he was like keeping that rent. But then it got to like the 2 years in, so I would have been about 17. And him and my mum surprised me with tickets to Australia, and they said I'd paid for it myself with my rent money.
Oh, wow.
So that was incredible.
Yeah.
Amazing. And at the time, I'd got a boyfriend, my first proper boyfriend, and I remember saying to my dad, I can't leave him behind. I've got a boyfriend. And he's like, Michelle, you're 17, get over yourself.
Yeah.
You haven't got no responsibilities. If you don't do it now, you never will. Go and enjoy your bloody life. If he's the one, he'll be there when you get back, or if he really wants to, he could go with you. Do you know what I mean? Anyway, so I went off to Australia, and I have got family out there. So the first month I was there, I stayed with family, and I was ringing up this guy every single day on the phone for the first month, and I just wanted to come home. Like I hadn't explored anything yet. I was lovesick and all the rest of it, and then I spoke to him one day, and basically he'd slept with my best mate. And although I was gutted, it was the best thing that could have happened, because I let go.
Yeah.
And then I went off and I had the best time of my life. It was amazing. I loved it. So from there, like I went sort of all up and down the East Coast and worked on farms and hairdressers and backpackers and different things like that, and carried on experimenting with drugs. While I was out there, I was into going like clubbing and things like that, and they had pills out there, and they didn't have coke, they had speed and they had pills, and so I'd be either drinking or taking like party drugs. And it wasn't all of the time, it'd probably be every few weekends or something like that. And in my eyes it was just a bit of fun.
Yeah.
And I didn't see it any more sinister than that, really. And then towards the end of my stay, like the time of year, the backpacking, like the working on the farms had dried up. And I'd landed in a backpackers in like Surfers Paradise, and it was a time of year when they'd got, like, it was party season basically, and all the girls that were in there were working in strip clubs, and so I followed suit and ended up working in a strip club with them. And from the very first night I met a guy and ended up trying crystal meth, and it was nuts. I think I was up for about 3 days solid. After about the third day, because I'd had one hit on this crystal meth, after about the third day I thought, oh my God, I need to come down. But I was still hypo, I was still running around like a loon and quite okay with that, but I knew my body needed rest. It was a really weird feeling. I've not had it with any other drug really. And
just from one hit? Yeah. Wow.
Really, it was like
really
probably
powerful.
about, yeah, it was. So on about the third day, I'm still with this guy, and he said, I've said to him, like, what can I do? I need to come down off this stuff. And he's like, oh, you probably want some China White. And I thought China White was like cocaine, and I didn't really know anything about it. I later found out that it was like pure white heroin. And so I've took this China White again in a hit, and ended up comatose under a bridge with my suitcases. And when I came round, I don't know how long I'd been out for. I couldn't speak. Like I knew what I wanted to say, but I couldn't get my words out. I was angry, but my body was so sort of sleepy, I couldn't react. And I really hated that feeling in that moment. I was sick, my skin was itchy, like I really didn't like that feeling, and I was quite annoyed, angry that like I took a drug what I didn't know what it was. And obviously that's my own fault for doing it, but I blamed him in that moment. And he later told me it was heroin, and I said, don't ever give that to me ever again. And that guy ended up coming back to England with me. He was an Australian guy, and we had like a really passionate but violent relationship, probably for about 1.5 years, something like that. And when I got back, I was like 18 years old, almost 19 years old. And I went back to my flat. Well, my dad has got a shop in Nuneaton, and he had a flat above it. So he let me move into the flat, and this guy moved in with me. And basically, over the next few months, I started like realising there was something going on with this guy. I didn't know what. I didn't know he was a drug addict. I didn't think I'd ever met a heroin addict. I didn't know what it was other than watching Trainspotting. That's as much knowledge as I had about heroin. And I'd got 2 jobs. I was like working in a warehouse and working in a Chinese, and planning to go back into hairdressing. And then during that period of time, I remember like my money had just kept disappearing out my bank, and things were going missing out the flat. And my friend turned round to me one day and told me, "Oh, he's a smackhead." And I was like, "What's a smackhead?" You know, I didn't know what she meant. And I said, "Oh, don't be ridiculous." When she told me, I was like, "Oh, stop being ridiculous." No, he isn't. And but when I went home to speak to him, and I sat him down and I said, "Look, this is what my friend's saying. Like, is it true?" And he says, "Yeah, it is true. I'm hooked on heroin and I need help." And so I thought I could help this guy, and I started like looking into it, and I took him to our local drugs team and tried to get him on a script and all that sort of stuff. But from that day forth, he every day would then like expect money off me and would ask me to try it with him, just try it every single day. And for about 3 months I refused. I was like, keep it away from me. And I think on my birthday I'd got some money to go shopping, and he took it off me to buy heroin, and I ended up saying to him basically, "Fuck you, like spending my money, I want some of that." And I took the heroin off him and started smoking, and that's really where I got hooked from. Not from that day, but that's where my mentality around it changed, and where I really started sort of getting into the drug scene a bit harder than I had done.
Yeah.
And within a really short space of time, I couldn't function enough to go into work, and he suggested like I went and worked in a massage parlour, and so that's what I started doing. My parents clocked on there was something not right. I remember my dad coming round to mine, and I'd got a black eye, and he was like saying, "Michelle, what's been going on?" And I just knocked myself on the cupboard. I remember being around my mum's one day, and I was falling asleep into my dinner, and she was like, "Why are you so tired?" And I'm like, you know, I couldn't really give her an answer, but they knew something weren't right, and I think they were doing their little investigations and all the rest of it. And I remember turning up at this massage parlour one day, and I've walked in, and there's like a letter on the front desk, and it had got like my real name and my working name on there, and my heart dropped because it was in my dad's handwriting, and I'll never forget that moment. It still brings a lot of emotions up. And I remember opening this letter, and it just said, "Michelle, we love you. We know what you're doing. Please come home. We're waiting for you." And that was enough to shock me in that moment, to think, maybe I need to change my life. Maybe I need to do something about this. And I had enough faith in my family to sort of go back home that day. My dad kicked that guy out, and he sat me down, sort of thing, him and my mum, and they just put their arms around me, and we all cried together. And I remember my dad saying to me, and he meant it like every word, he looked me in the eye and he said, "I'd rather kill you myself and take you down the woods than watch you carry on doing what you're doing. Like, I can't not watch you doing this shit." And you know, like, that was enough for me in that moment to have like a moment of clarity. And they locked me in a room and I got clean. Like, it was horrific. It was a horrific couple of weeks. My mum said I was like The Exorcist, but I knew I had to do it. And then the following year or so, I still drank and I still went out, and I didn't know that that was an issue for me. I really thought it was just the heroin that was an issue for me. I started following my own goals again. So I started working in hairdressers, got a new boyfriend, moved in with him. I started playing for a girls' football team, got my little moped licence and a little moped and like living the dream, you know. And I thought everything was great, you know. I'd got all these things around me what looked good, and to my family I thought, oh, they think I'm all right now, you know, like everybody that really cared, it looked like I was doing all right. Inside I was still empty. I still had some sort of unease, some disconnection, something what didn't sit right. I don't know what it was, and I just, for no reason I can think of today, went out and scored heroin again. You know, there wasn't really a craving as such that I remember. There wasn't an incident that happened. I just still had that unease going on inside.
It was just inevitable.
Yeah. And I guess I didn't have any answers at that time. I didn't know what the solutions were. I didn't know that I had like an illness of the mind that I needed to, you know. Yeah,
it was just at bay for a while. Yeah.
Yeah.
You'd put the drugs down, but you hadn't actually done anything about the problem.
Yeah, totally. And then so for the next few years, like I'd got my salon and I'd got my partner, and I was using behind his back, using behind my family's back, and that pattern of sort of sneakiness and destruction and lies and everything else like carried on, but now it had progressed to sort of heroin and crack.
Yeah. Smoking it. Yeah. When were you using it then? Like mornings, afternoons?
So my partner at the time, he was a postman, so he'd be up and out early, so I'd be able to use before I went to work.
Yeah.
And then I'd work till really late, or I'd tell him I was working till really late, and
use after work.
Yeah, and sometimes during work, I'd have to, if I was not well, I'd have to say to my customers, you know, I've got an urgent appointment I've got to do, and managed to somehow balance it. I don't quite know how, but I managed to keep it going like that for a few years. And during that time, like I did know there was a problem, and I did try like scripts. I did try going to groups for acupuncture and counselling and things like that, and I don't think I ever did it fully wholeheartedly, and I don't think I was really ready to either. I never really got anything out of them things, and I never got clean, and I think it reached a point where I'd gone down to about 6 stone in weight, and my behaviour was becoming more erratic, and my family again stepped in and asked me, Michelle, you need to go into rehab, you know, like, we know what's going on, you need to sort this out before you lose everything, you know, your mum will look after your shop for you, and she'll have your phones, and she'll just let them know you're going to be gone a few weeks and you can come back to it later. Anyway, they said to me they would detox me at home, and then I could come back. But then I caused absolute chaos that weekend.
Just checking that works, alright. Just checking that your wife was doing.
So like that weekend that I went to do a detox, I just caused so much chaos for my family. They couldn't cope anymore, and I realised maybe I need some help here. So they packed me off to a rehab. Now, I'd looked into a few rehabs while I was there, and there was only one that I would pick. There was one that said, if you do this programme, you're no longer an addict. If you do this programme, you're fixed. It was like not using medication, it was using vitamins and minerals. It was like a sauna detox, and it was life skills, and that all sounded really good. Like, you know, and when I rang them, they were really friendly on the phone. So I thought, that's the one I'm going to go to. And
sounds ace.
Yeah, it does, don't it?
Yeah.
Right by the sea as well.
Sauna and vitamins.
Yeah, man.
Brilliant.
So yeah, I thought it was wicked, and off I went. I lasted a few weeks because I just kept sneaking off and using, and they kicked me out. And like that next 3 months was where I probably for the first time had to fend for myself. And that then 3 months I was out on the street homeless, working for a gang, drug dealing, and like selling myself as well, like doing all of it really, whatever I could to get enough money to use. And that's when, because I wasn't around my family, I didn't have to balance my drug use, so it got really out of control immediately, using more than I'd ever used, and doing more dangerous things than I'd ever done, and mixing with people that I was really quite scared of. And within 3 months I just knew in the pit of my stomach that I had to get out. I knew I had to go back to rehab, and I knew I was fucked. And I had this overwhelming feeling the police were coming through the door. I was paranoid of all the people I was mixing with. I did have a bit of crack psychosis going on, and I was in fear of my life to myself, thinking I'm going to either kill myself the way I'm going, or someone's going to do it for me. And so that's where my head was in that moment. And I remember it being Christmas time, and it was the worst Christmas I'd had, the most lonely Christmas I'd had. And like the guy I was staying with had been beaten up, and we hadn't got food, and it was just awful. And by January, this is mad, so by January the 3rd, I rang my mum and I said, Mum, I'm ready to go back to rehab, and I'm ready to do it properly this time. January the 4th, she came and picked me up. January the 5th, 30 houses got busted and everybody got arrested, and I was the only one that got away. And all them people ended up in prison, and I got shipped back off to rehab. Now, this time round in the rehab, I put my all into it. I did everything I possibly could right. And the police found me like about 6 weeks later. And when they found me, they couldn't believe the difference. They'd got all the police footage of me, and I looked really ill. And they'd got this, like me now, and I looked healthy. I'd put a couple of stone on. I'd been in the sauna with the vitamins and everything else. And yeah, I looked all right. Yeah. I could communicate again. I didn't look grey.
Didn't look like the Walking Dead anymore. Yeah.
No. And so when I went to court, they were just blown away really, because I didn't see that sort of stuff very often. And they just sent me back to the rehab and said, get on with it, you know. Sending you to prison isn't going to work. Yeah. So I was really lucky, and so I felt really...
higher power moment.
Massively.
Yeah.
Massively. And so that was my journey then. I ended up sticking around at that rehab for about 5 years or more. I went through the programme, then I volunteered, and then I stayed on as a staff member. And during those 5 years, so it was a Scientology rehab.
Yeah.
It was not like your average 12-step rehab or something like that. It was run differently. It wasn't connected to any of the services. It was a completely secular organisation. They totally had their own rules and regulations on things.
Yeah.
And I became really secluded from society.
How did you specifically get into a Scientology rehab then? Like, how did that even come about?
So I didn't know it was a Scientology rehab.
Ah, right.
It wasn't advertised as that, and it isn't advertised as that. And if you were to go there, they wouldn't say it's that.
Ah,
They'd
sneaky. How is it still running?
That one got closed down, but it's reopened under a new charity number.
Oh.
And the actual rehabilitation part of it, they've taken any religious stuff out of it. So it is supposedly just like the tools rather than any religious stuff added.
What's their unique selling point? Obviously, like the 12 steps is you have a spiritual awakening as a result of working the steps.
So
what's theirs?
So their overall purpose is to help you become it's really similar to the 12 steps. It's to help you become a fully productive member of society again,
right.
like living clean and moral, active member of society again.
Yeah.
But actually, for me, although in that moment I did become those things, I was only inside that rehab. So I didn't ever really become a part of society while I was there, and I lost sight of my own goals. And I'm not blaming them, but I do feel that for any person recovering, I do believe you need to kind of find yourself a little bit, find out what you enjoy doing and become you, and strengthen your positive points and start letting go of the negative. And I feel that for me, the day I finished my programme there, they took me to the church, and like my entire life became that. And I feel like I almost wasn't given a chance to find me or follow any of my own goals. And when I came to the end of that programme, I had got, like, part of their programme is to rehabilitate your past, like doing amends on your different things from the past, and set goals for the future and how you're going to create them. And I did do that process, but as soon as I became a staff member with them, that all got put aside, and my entire life was with them. And like to the point where I didn't see my family anymore, and they grieved for me like I'd died. And
your family? Mm-hmm. Oh my God. Did it become a bit brainwashy? Yeah. Yeah,
I think so. In a strange way, I think I needed that. For like my old way of thinking was not very healthy for me, so I definitely needed a new way of thinking.
Yeah.
And I absolutely see so much value in what I did there, but it became all encompassing. So what would have been better is to have a bit of balance there, and maybe do a couple of days with them, a couple of days with family, have a bit of balance to find and strengthen my own recovery. But I didn't strengthen any of my own recovery. My entire life was just helping others in that rehab. And I was there then for the next few years, and I worked my way up to being the manager, and I had like a lot of responsibility again, which I probably couldn't cope with, and I know I couldn't cope with. And because I didn't have sense of who I was, my whole identity became that staff member. My whole identity became this person that helped others, and they put me on a bit of a pedestal as well. Like while I worked there was certain things that I did within the organisation which I would never probably have had a chance to do with any other organisation. Like I went and met MPs and did stuff with MPs, and I went on TV and did like a little TV programme, documentary thing, and on the radio, and went out to homeless shelters and did little drug education lectures in schools and things like that. And I loved them experiences, they were amazing, but it also became this thing where like I felt like the poster girl for this particular rehab.
I'm getting a sense of this idea of perfection again from childhood.
Yes.
Yeah.
Massively.
Yeah.
Massively.
So you're feeling like you've got to live up to this poster child image, and yet deep down you're not there.
Totally.
Within yourself.
Totally. And that became really, like I was saying before, my whole identity. And I became suicidal actually. Like I've never been suicidal, and I remember walking down the stairs one day and looking out the window and thinking I want to jump, and that scared me. And not knowing what to do with myself, because from morning till night I'd be working, and mostly my work was in the rehab, and it was really intense, and sometimes I was doing things what I didn't agree with morally around finances and things like that. They did a lot of like fundraising or like asking people for donations, and I found some of that a little bit immoral, and but the need to keep the rehab going meant that you had to do that stuff.
Yeah.
And so there was a lot of pressure and a lot of responsibility, and not very much backup or support. There was nowhere to outlet what was going on. I didn't have, like in there, they don't believe in counselling, as in talking about what's going on. There's certain actions that they do, and I didn't have that backup, basically, and I didn't know better. I didn't know any other way, because that's the way I'd learned.
Yeah.
And so I didn't recognise all these feelings that were going on, and although I had a lot of awareness around certain parts of myself, I had no awareness about like me. You know, so I was looking at everybody else and trying to fix everybody else, when I was really running around quite unfixed myself.
Yeah.
And
that's the way that it could have gone with the one of the reasons why in the early days with the 12 steps they opted not to do the rehabs, you know, because they were going to do that. They were going to have 12-step rehabs and 12-step they were going to have buildings, weren't they, dedicated to AA initially.
Wow.
And the reason why they didn't go down that route was because of what you were just describing there, is that obviously you've got to pay the rent, haven't you? There's all these things then that come into play where it becomes hierarchical as well.
Absolutely. And I think because of my experience with that, when I came into the 12-step fellowships and I was able to look at all that stuff, it rang so true, because I've had direct negative experiences around that stuff where it doesn't work, and it actually becomes I believe, I'm not saying it is like this, but I believe it's like an immoral corporate kind of business rather than genuine help and giving yourself selflessly. It changes into something else, because you've got to pay the rent.
And somebody's in charge, and it's all about money, and then it becomes about power, doesn't it? Wherever money's involved. Yeah. And what was I going to say then about? Oh, the 12 traditions. That guards us against all that stuff.
It does.
And having those traditions in place is amazing. Yeah. Because even though there is still corruption, obviously, within some 12-step organisations, there's bound to be, because of people involved, but it's, you know, it guards against it all going pear-shaped. Absolutely.
I've found I'm still learning about that stuff. I'm still looking into that stuff, but each time I hear a nugget of information, it rings true, and it makes me realise I'm absolutely in the right place. Yeah. And I look back, because I get really confused sometimes, because I learnt so much through that place, through Scientology, and I've learnt a lot of tools that are still workable in my life today. Yeah. I get really confused. Should I be going back there and going back into that line of work, or should I go back there and help, and you know, all them sorts of questions, because there is so much good stuff I did do with them. Yeah. You know, but when I you know, remember that stuff, and I look at the traditions and just realise, nope, I'm in exactly the right place.
Yeah. Well, it's like a program, isn't it? You become programmed by whatever it is that you're doing, and then you have to deprogram yourself from it if it doesn't work for you, and that's really difficult. That's where there's a lot of conflicts arise within you. I mean, you know, you have that programming just from your family of origin and from your friends, and sometimes, I get that, where, you know, I'll be about to do something and I'll think, does this sit right with me? Is this the right thing to do? And actually, in my family or with my friends, it would have been the norm. Yeah. But now, in day-to-day life, it isn't the norm. And, you know, and I've got a different choice now. And it's just a new program. A new program.
And how did you find, like, reprogramming yourself? Like, for me, I found it really challenging at times. And actually, that's where all my defects end up coming to play, because my control will kick in, or my pride will kick in, or like this either inferior or superior thing will kick in, and like sometimes I need that smashing out of me a little
Yeah.
bit, really.
Well, it's been, I mean, it's, to answer your question, it's been the most difficult thing I've ever done in my life. And even up until recently, as I said to you before we started the podcast, I've just done a step 5. And if I'm absolutely honest with you, during the step 4, I went to a meeting a couple of weeks ago, and I went out for a meal prior to it with a load of people in recovery, and I had a great time. I was having a lovely evening. And then I got into the meeting and I shared that I was thinking about killing myself. And I'd been thinking over the last few days, like this thought had just come up, and I'd just be like, just kill yourself. Just end it now. Just stop this pain. Because I was feeling so much like all the emotional stuff was being dredged up again. Then I did my step 5 on the weekend, and I feel absolutely fantastic now. And at one of the meetings that I went to around that time, there was an old timer sharing, and he said he'd been sober about 30 odd years. And I shared about, you know, the way I was feeling and stuff, and he said, smash the ego. But he said, whatever you do, smash the ego and replace it with love.
Yeah.
And he said, and that's what this program's all about. And that is reprogramming yourself, isn't it? You know.
So interesting. It's really sad, actually. Like today, I had a phone call from a friend to say that one of our close friends, like, died from an overdose yesterday, and he's been trying to get this stuff for about 10 years. And I was out for a meal with him last week, and you know, to sit with him at the dinner table and have a chat with him, I would never have guessed that he'd be dead today. And that was a week ago.
That's terrible.
And you know, when you realise how strong that ego is, because he was a lovely chap, he's been trying to do the fellowship stuff for quite some time, but what he's never done is go through the step work.
Yeah.
And every time he goes to get into the step work, he has a massive back off, and has just not followed that path. And the last few times he's shared has been around trying to smash his ego enough to get honest in his step work.
That's the key word, honesty. I mean, what became apparent to me, I mean, I'm in, I think, my 9th year of recovery now, and this year what became the most apparent to me was, you know, when they talk about the how, H-O-W, honesty, open-minded and willingness. I've always been quite open-minded, and I've always had a lot of willingness to do things and to change, and you need that. Definitely, you know, if you're not open-minded, then you're never going to be open to the concepts that are going to come to you.
Yeah.
And if you're not willing, you'll never put yourself through it in the first place. But the honesty part of it is massive, and that's the thing for me now, is like, I can't get away with the tiniest bit of dishonesty anymore, because it creates disease in me.
Yeah.
And when I've got any sort of disease within me, I'll pick up the nearest thing, whether it's food or drugs or alcohol or sex or work or whatever it is, just to fix myself. And you know all this stuff, like you go to 12-step meetings, and you know all this stuff on an intellectual level, but it's got to come in, it's got to get to your heart, it's got to go from the head to the heart.
I've noticed in myself, like the past few weeks, there's been moments where if I've tried to share in a meeting, if I'm not sharing from my heart, I can't share, or it comes out really not right.
Yeah.
I can't explain it, but my words don't.
You feel a bit ashamed after sharing, don't you, if you don't share from your heart?
Totally.
Yeah.
And like I'm back on a step 1, and I've just read out my life story, and there's all these things coming out to play in myself at the minute, like manageability around time and my work. Like I've got quite a lot of different things popping off at work at the minute, and you know, I'm really recognising them little patterns, and also in myself, like around the defect stuff. What I noticed when I read my zero out, my life story, was one of my major defects is being passive, and when I've been in active addiction, it's took me to almost death on several occasions, and in recovery, when I've been clean, it's took me to some pretty dark places, like where I don't stand up for myself, and that's where then that self-pity and that feeling of not being good enough, them feelings that I don't fit in, like those feelings like are totally created from that being passive. And so I'm really in the process at the moment of trying to change that and recognise and ask for help around it. And I definitely feel like that's like one of my major things that I need to work on. And I think because I've gone back and I'm on my step 1, those things are really creeping in at me at the moment, like the passiveness and the manageability around time and things like that.
Yeah.
So like that's all like really popping. Yet a month ago I was totally at peace and I felt like everything was great and and it's so interesting that from moment to moment in recovery things change all of the time.
Yeah.
And those things that you thought were fixed or on the way to be fixed can creep back in.
Yeah.
You know.
Well, life's just an ebb and flow of pleasure and pain, really. So I've come to realise that you've just got to go with the flow, and if you're fighting against the flow, that is where the difficulties come in, and that I think is where my program comes in, and where I'm at right now, like today, especially off the back of the step 5 over the weekend. I feel like I woke up this morning and I didn't feel like I was going to struggle. I felt like I was gonna just accept life as it is, and I was gonna just not fight against it. I mean, ultimately, you can't, like we get taught in the 12 steps, and well, in recovery we get taught that you can't control people, places, and things.
Yeah.
And to truly understand that on a soul level means that you would never even attempt to change the behaviour of the people around you, because you just accept that they're being the way that they are.
Yeah.
And when you look at a child, for example, let's say, for example, a child's having a tantrum, you wouldn't try to stop them having the tantrum. You would just accept that they're having a tantrum, and then you deal with it accordingly. Yet when your partner or somebody at work or your mum or your dad says something or does something that you don't agree with, or you irritate, or it irritates you, what I would do in that circumstance is I'd become irritated, and then I'd want that person to change in order for me to feel okay. And that's just not reality. That's fighting against reality. So I think that's where I'm at with it at the moment, really, is that I've kind of known all this stuff for quite some time, and I've written about it, but I haven't actually been putting it into practice. And I think now it's gone from the head to the heart, and now hopefully I'll be able to put it into practice a bit more. But the next time the next time Adele says something that I disagree with, then we'll see how good I am at putting it into practice.
I think for me that's something I would love to be able to do, and I think I'm quite similar in saying that the idea, it's like an ideal, isn't it? An ideal way of being, but in reality it is really difficult, and I definitely notice that when I'm like feeling good in myself, I'm much more able to do that. And I also notice that the people I'm emotionally connected to, I find it much harder to be like that with.
Yeah.
Like with my family, for the first year in my recovery, anything and everything would trigger me off to having some sort of reaction, whether it be anger, whether it would be jealousy of my brothers and sisters, whether it would be a feeling of inadequacy. There would always be something triggered every time I would see my family. And now, like I've started to learn how to be around my family and enjoy their time, and it's really nice actually. Like if I spot in myself that I'm starting to feel a little bit triggered in any way, I'll do my best not to like put it on them, but rather than that, like remove myself from the situation and talk about it with somebody outside, or have like a moment where I go and like meditate for 5 or 10 minutes and like ground myself, and the answers come usually.
Yeah.
And
that's a really healthy way of being. It's like Eckhart Tolle in The Power of Now calls it the pain body, doesn't he? That it's activated. And I've kind of like written about it recently, and I call it the ego alarm. It's like as soon as my ego alarm goes off, it's like this feeling inside me of like alert, like red alert. And whereas in the past I would just go with that straight away and just react to it, now I've got that pause. You know, they say God is in the pause, don't they? And I've got the ability to step back from it now and have a bit of awareness around what's happening. That doesn't mean to say that I don't still get angry and go with it sometimes, because obviously I do.
Yeah.
But I think recovery is about progressively getting better. Whereas in active addiction you progressively get worse, recovery is about progressively getting better. And I think that also, you know, talking about perfectionism, you know, you talked about the like needing to be perfect, and I think that was the cause of me feeling so bad a couple of weeks ago, because I was reading through my step 4 and it was saying repeatedly, I want them to be different, you know, I want them to be perfect. And it was also saying I can't be perfect as well. And I think my ego was really, really finding that difficult, you know, like, well, hang on a minute, and I must be perfect, you know, and there's no such thing as perfection.
There isn't. And do you know something that's massively helped me actually in recovery? Like, I've got a very different relationship with my dad now, and he's mellowed out in his old age, and so have I. And he said to me, he also recognised this perfectionism thing that has been part of my whole life, really.
What, in himself?
Pattern in himself and in me, and in that pattern of what has driven us both, because we're both really similar in lots of ways.
Yeah.
And when I first got out of treatment 2 years ago, he sat me down and he said, Michelle, please take it on board that it's not about being the best at anything, it's not about reaching the top of the food chain, it's not about any of that sort of stuff, it's like really about enjoying the journey and like enjoying the people that you're around and being present, and like he also has absolutely took that on board, and he's a totally different person, and I really enjoy being around him now. And if like, he still has his moments where he gets a bit triggered, and if he's had a drink and whatnot, and we have an agreement now where we'll spend time together, and if either of us is getting like that, rather than take it out on each other, we'll call it a day and I'll go home.
Yeah.
And it's really nice to be able to do that, and he also has that understanding.
So he's had some sort of spiritual awakening himself, by the sounds of it.
He has. It's a bit of a crazy journey, really.
But what happened? So obviously you said that you've been 2 years sober now, or 2 years clean. So from the point where you got clean in the rehab, the Scientology rehab, to now being clean, what happened in that period of time?
Wow. So this is the mess.
It's just the real story.
Yeah, this is the real story.
This is the bit we've been waiting for.
Yep. This is the juice.
Yeah.
Yeah, so basically, like, towards the end of my stay in that Scientology rehab, I was the manager at the end, and I'd reached this point where I felt suicidal. I was working from like morning till night, not leaving my desk. I'd have dinner brought to my desk, breakfast brought to my desk, everything. I didn't like clean, because the clients would clean. You know, like, the only thing I did was have a shower in the morning and whack me washing in the washing machine. That's all I really did for myself. The rest was done, and the rest was just me working. I'd pretty much completely lost contact with my family. My family had been to visit me a couple of times, but each time they'd been to visit, I'd been too busy to see them, or I'd stopped off to have a cup of tea with them, and then it's like a 4 to 5 hour journey for them, and they'd see me for half an hour and then go. and they'd kind of reached a point where they'd given up trying to have a relationship with me. That they thought that me being a Scientologist was better than being a drug addict, but actually they're done. And you know, I had no value to them anymore. Like, I wasn't of value as a daughter, I wasn't present for them in any way, and I had no other thing going on in my life except that place. And I valued that with like my entire life. I put my whole heart into it, and felt like it was the only way forward for me. I totally believed in what I was doing there, and I still do have like that strong belief in the programme. I think the programme was quite good. A few little flaws that I can see now relating it back to a 12-step programme, but actually, like, if it had been workable in society, if that had been done in society, and the tools used in a way that would be active in your life rather than knowledge, then potentially it could be worth more.
Yeah.
And so I reached this point where I didn't know who I was anymore. I was suicidal. I was working all the hours, every possible hour. I wasn't being paid, and I was doing stuff that I didn't agree with doing. And I just kind of reached this point where I didn't feel I could go on anymore, and I'd lost interest, I'd lost motivation, I was starting to become quite negative. It was quite a tough time, really, and there was a guy there who finished the programme. He was coming to the end of his programme. He'd been there a year, and we'd got several situations going on in this place, and I ended up having this relationship with a guy who'd just finished the programme. And it came out, like, you know, it came out to the senior staff that were outside of the organisation, and you know, in that moment, like, I had to make a decision: do I stay and put all this right, or do I go? And I made a decision to go. And they didn't want me to go. They tried to keep me there against my will, and my dad ended up having to get me out. He had to come and get me out of there, and that was also a really scary time, you know. Some of it my fault, some of it theirs, and it's never really been fully corrected. It's something that I'm still figuring out today. How can I put that stuff right? And that guy, he went off and relapsed, I went off and relapsed. He is clean today, and I speak to him on a regular basis, and he's doing really well now. He's in a 12-step programme. But at that time, it was a real mess. And I remember going back to my family's home. My dad had me back straight away, and I felt totally broken. I felt more empty than I ever had my whole life. I felt like I had no friends. I didn't know how to communicate, because in that place, not only was it really secular from the rest of society, they also had almost their own language. You know, their own words, they had their own dictionary. It was almost like a whole new language, and that's all I'd been speaking, this recovery language, for like 5 years. And I was back in society with my family, none of whom are addicts or been through anything remotely similar. I had no friends that had been through anything remotely similar. And I remember going out with my brother like the next day after I got out, and we went shopping. And we went into a shop, and he was chatting away to some woman behind the cash desk. And oh, isn't it a nice day? Oh, the weather's nice, isn't it? Oh yeah, la 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 la. And I just remember this overwhelming like voice in my head: what the fuck are you doing here? Like, what are you doing? Oh my God, this is mind numbing. You know, like, I felt like I'd been removed. Like, I don't know
like
how
an
to,
alien.
Yeah. Completely.
Yeah.
And I just wanted to cry. I don't know what I wanted to do. I just felt totally lost. And you know, I just genuinely did not know what to do with myself. And And that was like the beginning of, not the beginning because it was obviously already happening, but that's when I relapsed. And this time it got a lot darker than it had done any of the other times. Because I'd got this thing built into me at this point, this conditioning from this other rehab, that, you know, any other way doesn't work. They believed theirs was the only way. I still had that thinking.
Yeah.
I still truly believed that theirs was the only rehab that could work.
Yeah.
And so I wouldn't go to the local drug services to get on a script. I wouldn't go to any of the rehabs. I wouldn't go to counselling. I wouldn't go for acupuncture. Like prior to that, I'd done like natural or spiritual healing stuff. Like I wouldn't do any of that stuff either. So I was completely cut off from anything and everything that could potentially help, because I really believed there was nothing there that would help me.
It's really dangerous, isn't it?
Oh, it was absolutely horrific. And so that moment there, the next few months, consisted of me robbing like my family's homes, the neighbours' homes, really causing a lot of devastation for my families, like my brothers and sisters, my parents. And like my dad was really desperate, you know, like to get me the help that I needed, but he also wasn't willing to take my shit anymore. And like they called up the rehab again, the same one I'd just come from, and they said, look, because they owed me a lot of money, like a lot of money they owed me in wages. They said, we can send her out to the one in Holland, but we wouldn't be allowed to bring her back here because she's worked here and it wouldn't go good for the other clients if they saw her in that state back here. So they sent me out to the one over in Holland, and from day one I knew it was the wrong thing for me to do. Like I arrived there and it just felt totally not right in my stomach. Even though I was totally messed up and I knew I needed help, I knew that this also wasn't the way, and I carried on using in that rehab. Because I'd worked in the one in England, they put me to work from day one. They didn't put me through a detox. I was like ill or using, one or the other. I was either rattling or I was high. And they were putting me to work and just saying that I was there for free, so I needed to make my keep. And I was like, well, actually, I'm owed a lot of money, and they said if I came here, they'd pay for it. And they said, well, they haven't paid for it, so you still have to work. And so while I was like in a cold turkey, they got me in the office trying to get donations off people. I couldn't even speak or walk properly. I was shaking, I was being sick, I'd got diarrhoea, and I just thought, what am I doing? You know, and
where were you getting drugs from then?
So there was a few people in the rehab that were like using. And we all were just bouncing off each other. Like it was really badly run. The one in Holland is closed down now, but it was in its last year or so when I arrived. And it was really badly run. They had got a lady who was working there all of the time with no backup, real similar to how it was in England. And it was just really unethical, really. I don't really know how it survived as long as it did, if I'm honest. There wasn't any proper... It wasn't run like it would be run if it was overseen by the government, for example, or overseen by, you know...
no standards.
That's the one.
Yeah.
Like, I can't remember what it's called now.
Yeah, I know what you mean.
But all that stuff. So it was just not your average rehab. It wasn't run anything like a rehab, and it was just like a halfway house with people running around using, in and out. They'd got rooms there where it was like mixed dorms.
You couldn't make it up, could you? It sounds like it's like science fiction.
It was crazy. It's absolutely insane. Like, for me to really repeat some of them stories, what happened in that place, makes me feel like an alien, because I think nobody would get away with that stuff. But that stuff was happening.
Like what?
for example, there was girls there that had been like sex workers, and they'd come there and they'd be getting clean, and the manager would need money, so she'd ask them to contact their pimps and things like that to get money, and knowing the girls would be scared and saying, well, actually I don't want to see them people anymore, you know, thinking that that's a safe place for them to be, and she would like enforce them to go and see these guys to get money, things like that. Or like I said before, men and women in the same room, so like there was lots of like relationship stuff going on. Like I said, with me, I was rattling, yet I was expected to do work in the office. There would be new people coming through the door rattling, and the people that knew how to look after people in detox, regardless of how well they were, would be expected to help them people in detox. Things like that.
Yeah. Just a shit show.
Basically.
Yeah.
So I didn't cope with that either, even though I was in no way, shape or form well enough to make very rational decisions. I knew that that was not the right place for me.
Yeah.
And I ran away.
Yeah.
And so I had about 3 years in Holland, and I ran away, and the people that we'd been buying our drugs off, you know, I went off and they got me somewhere to stay, and I was stopping with this girl, and in Holland the level of degradation is with sex and drugs and things like that is, in my opinion, a lot worse than in England.
Really?
Because it's almost legal.
Yeah.
Like to work behind the windows, it's a business. They
Yeah.
see it as a business and everything else, and it's quite usual to see that happening. Because that's normal. When people go past the moral standards, their moral standards become a lot worse. Like there's human trafficking going on. There's, for me personally, it was really scary. I went out there, and when I was in this girl's house, any man would expect, because we're on drugs, that we are sex workers. So if you're not willing to, they don't care. Right. So it's really quite scary as a woman, especially because I was from another country, so I didn't understand the language at that point.
Yeah.
I learnt it later on, but during my early days there, I didn't understand what was being said, and it was really quite scary. I remember this dealer who kind of befriended me, and he would ask me lots of questions, he would talk to me every day, and he probably became one of the only people that I really spoke to that understood English quite well. And looking back now, I know that he groomed me, but at that time I just thought, oh, he's a really nice guy, and he basically said that he'd get me to work in his mum's hairdressers and all this stuff, and he said, but we need to go and get your papers from the council offices, and just let me do the talking, you know, I'll sort it out, you just sign where they tell you to sign. And that's what I went off and did, and actually I was signing my life away to working behind the windows and that sort of stuff, you know. Yeah. And the next day he took me to this place and like gave me a load of clothes and said, get changed, you're working in here. And his mate who was with him was saying, oh, I wish I was a woman, I'd earn loads of money. And like they just kind of played it like that, and I felt like I had no choice, and so I was working behind the windows then for quite a few months, and it was really scary. It was they took my passport off me. I knew where my passport was, but there was a camera on it, like in a drawer in the kitchen. I tried to get my passport out several times, and each time I took it out they'd come straight to me and say, give it back. Every time I went to the shop, or if I went anywhere and I'd come back, they'd give me a rundown of exactly where I've been, exactly who I've spoken to.
Jesus.
So I was being watched all of the time, and it turned, like, because I was still taking heroin and crack, and I was also really secluded from anybody. Like, the other girls that were in this place were from different countries with all different languages, and none of us spoke the same language, so none of us were able to communicate with each other. And I was really traumatised. Like, I became really, really, really traumatised. Like, I had this crack psychosis where, to this day, I do believe some of it's true and some of it I don't know is true. But where I was just saying, if I went anywhere, they'd tell me where I'd been, so I believed that everybody was watching me. I believed that I had something on my phone that was watching me. I know that there was cameras in there watching me. I know, you know what I mean? So it became this thing where I believed that everybody was watching me, not just those specific people.
Constant.
And I was extremely paranoid. My entire life was just to get more drugs, more drugs, more drugs. I was doing things that initially, like, some of the things I'd agree to, some of the things I wouldn't agree to, but actually in the end it didn't matter what I agreed to or not. I was an animal, basically. And it was really awful. And towards the end of that experience, one of the regular guys that used to come into me had come in with a little bit of paper and like out loud, he's going, let me just write my email address down for you. But actually what he wrote down was mafia coming at 6 for you. So he was warning me that I needed to get out, but he didn't want to say it because of the cameras. So I kept that bit of paper and put it in my pocket, and I knew I couldn't take anything with me. I knew that everything that was there had to stay there, my passport and my belongings and everything else. And I just ran, I left, and I ran and I ran and I ran. I found some police. I spoke to them police that were also from that area, and I said to them what was happening, and they asked me, am I on drugs? I said yes, and they laughed at me and said, you better go back to where you've just come from. And I said, no, I'm not doing that. I'd rather go and sit in the train station where I know there's cameras everywhere and I can't get taken. Do you know what I mean? Like, at least there it's going to be visible. And they just laughed at me and said that we can't do anything, like, you know. And so I kept running. I went to a hospital, asked them for help, but I had no passport, I had no health insurance. They also couldn't help me. And I remember, like, just running and just being after one trauma after another over the next few days, until finally the only person I could possibly think of ringing, well, I rang 3 actually. I rang my mum. I told my mum everything. My mum said to me, Michelle, we've done everything for you and you're still in this situation. There is nothing else we can do for you. You need to do it this time. It's not about us rescuing you. I love you with all my heart, but you need to make the change and you need to ring the rehab and go back. You know, and that was a hard pill to swallow, but it's absolutely what I believe was needed in that moment. I rang the rehab back, the one I'd been to before, even though I didn't want to go back there, but I didn't know any other way out. I rang them. They also said they couldn't take me. They'd done everything they could and I'd caused havoc there, and actually they weren't willing to help me anymore. And then the only other person I could think of ringing was this guy who had been friends with the girl I'd stayed with when I first ran away from rehab. Now, he wasn't a drug addict and he wasn't a dealer, he was just connected to this girl as a friend. And I rang him. He was the only other person I could think of that wasn't connected to anything. So I rang him and he came and collected me and he said he'd help me, but actually I ended up being locked in his house for 3 months, and so the trauma carried on. And so, like, my time in Holland was just degradation, really. It was just constant degradation. And when like, after sort of the last, or towards the last month that I was there, he used to play this real strange game where he'd let me out the house and say, right, be back at a certain time. but then he'd follow me and make sure I come back every time. And one of the days where he'd let me out, the police picked me up and asked me for my ID, and of course I didn't have my ID, so they arrested me and they took me back to the police station. And from that day, that was the day where I believe like my surrender came. I believe that's the moment where, even though I hadn't stopped using, that's the moment where I knew it was over. The police got the foreign police involved and they helped me get my passport back. They got me into like this shelter, and that shelter got me like health insurance and into a rehab, a different rehab, a totally new rehab, separate to all this other stuff I'd done before. And they were amazing actually. Like, I got there really traumatised, I couldn't really speak. I was completely like full of crack psychosis. I was the shell of a person that I was, and I was completely, utterly broken. That's how I felt. And they really helped me. They gave me like a spiritual counsellor, because they knew of the trauma and they knew that I'd need someone to bounce off regularly, that I could build up trust with. They got me on a script. I had like a psychiatrist that diagnosed me with PTSD and ADHD. And like the PTSD I had like EMDR counselling for, and the ADHD they put me on Ritalin, which actually at the time I do believe helped, and it helped me to like refocus and start putting things where it was meant to be mentally, and it kind of helped me stay more consistent in that time, because I'd been just popping here, there and everywhere. I'd been really not able to be anywhere, and it just helped me to just kind of settle in that moment. And then like during that whole period, as I started coming through that and just like de-stressing from that time, they started suggesting that we went to 12-step fellowship meetings. And I went to my first meeting while I was out in Holland in that rehab, and it was spoken in Dutch. I still didn't know the Dutch language, I knew a few words, and I remember sitting there feeling really insecure and everything else, but I felt the love in that room, and I felt connection in that room, and them people in there held me. And I still stay in touch with them today. And yeah, it was really, really horrific but beautiful time. And like when I came back to England, about 3 years ago. And the day that I came back to England, my dad had a mini stroke, and my family put it down to the stress of me, and I wasn't allowed to see my family for probably about 6 months, something like that, or maybe less than that. But I wasn't allowed to see my dad anyway, because they do believe, I do believe as well, the stress of me would have caused something like that. I'm not saying it was entirely me, but I think I had something to do with it. And that's really where my dad had all of his change, or part of his change, and it's where I kind of knew that I had to keep working on my stuff. I came back to England still homeless, still on a script, still dabbling with drugs, but I'd had a little taste of what I could have. And I got straight away, even with all that stuff going on, I carried on like searching, and I went to like a counselling, and I got counselling straight away for carry on with the PTSD counselling. I went to groups. I met a guy in a group who took me to NA meetings, and he became my partner really quickly, and I kind of latched onto him straight away, and I I kind of was in a point in that moment where I still had no identity, and I didn't know how to walk down the street on my own, and I think I was still very, very lost. I didn't know where I belonged. I didn't belong with my family. I didn't belong in that rehab. I didn't belong in society, and I didn't know who I was, you know. So like I still had that going on with the added trauma, and so it was kind of quite a painful time. But I was so done with that negative way of life. I really wanted recovery, and I really wanted to find a way out, and that's really where my journey began, with recovery. I got stable on my script. I moved in with that guy. I was going to meetings, and I got service, and I'd do tea and coffee, and I'd do like standing at the door and greeting people, and that really helped me to get out of myself a little bit, alongside trying to look for a 12-step rehab. At this point I really realised that the 12-step way of life was the only way out for me, and it was the only way that I could do it in society. Everything else I'd tried hadn't worked, and I looked for a rehab that did 12 steps where I could detox off my script at the same time, and I found one, and I was able to get it through my local drugs team. It took some fighting with the funding panel and everything else, but I managed to secure a place in a treatment centre, and I went off there just over 2 years ago, and it was the best thing that I ever did. I was there for 12 weeks. The first probably 8 weeks of it I could barely speak. I couldn't sit in the groups and open my mouth. I really struggled with it, but while I was doing the groups, I was doing like going through the steps, like one step a week, and finding that awareness about myself. It was really, really empowering. I noticed that while I was going through them steps, I reconnected with me again. I reconnected with my family. I reconnected with my higher power. Like, part of the process there was that you meditated every day, you prayed every day, you did meetings, not every day, but you did at least 3 meetings a week, and that you did like a nightly inventory, and you did the nightly inventory from the first day you got there, even while you was detoxing, so you can look at your part in things and take responsibility and stop the blame game, I suppose. And
Put your blame thrower down.
Yes, totally. So it was a really positive experience. I put my all into it. Towards the end of the stay there, I'd made some really good friends. I felt completely connected. I felt like, so when we do our groups, at the beginning when I first started and I couldn't even look at anybody, at the end, like, I was bouncing off everybody in the room. I was alive. I felt like I was a fun person to be around. I was connected. I was aware. I was able to spot my stuff in myself, spot stuff in other people, say that. I became who I felt I always was meant to be in that moment. And so when I finished there, I really felt like I'd achieved everything and more that I could possibly have hoped for. And then I came back to my hometown, and I was living with my partner, and life crept in, I suppose. Like, I went through a phase, so I was doing my hairdressing on the side. Like, I didn't drop all them behaviours when I got home. Like, all my old behaviours started creeping back in, so I was doing like hairdressing on the side, earning like cash in hand. I was mixing with people that were still drug dealing and involving themselves with crime, and I was doing that as well as volunteering in a rehab, and I started getting this pain inside, you know, this, I didn't feel as, I weren't as free anymore, and that progressed, that whole feeling progressed. I had this quite awful relationship with this guy, and we got engaged really early on, which was totally the wrong thing to do. But in that
fix.
moment, absolutely a fix, completely a fix. You know, we had really nothing in common apart from that he'd helped me get into the, you know, into the 12-step fellowships, and for that I will always be like grateful to him, you know. But aside from that, we were really unhealthy for each other. He triggered me off. I had this incredible jealousy and rage, and you know, we both were quite horrific to each other. And I got to a point where I just couldn't go on anymore like that, you know, and I'd then by this point progressed to working in another service, and progressed from being a volunteer to working part-time, and just knew that the way I was living wasn't how I wanted to be living, and I still wasn't fully free, and I knew I needed to do more to become free. So about roughly just over a year ago, I was working with my sponsor, and I was doing a lot of step work and following all the suggestions of recovery, and I'd been away with my family on holiday. It was my brother's wedding, and I had such an incredible time with my family, like where I was talking earlier about being triggered off with like emotional stuff with my family. I had those triggers on holiday, but because I was in Jamaica, I wasn't able to pick up the phone to the people I would normally pick the phone up to. So I actually really did have to put into practice taking myself off and meditating or praying and connecting with my higher power. And each time I did that, something incredible would happen, and I would have like a higher power moment. On almost every time I did that, the situation would be solved, and it would be also something quite special had happened. And so it was undeniable that that was real for me. And I had moments with my dad as well where, so I went on this holiday, and it was a massive drinking holiday. All my family, there's 20 odd of us there, like drinking and everything, and I'm the only person not drinking on this holiday. And so I'd said to my dad, look Dad, I hope you don't mind, but I'm going to go off probably 3 times a week during this holiday to just go and do a meeting. I really feel that I need to just stay connected to that. It's the first time in my recovery where I'm really spending a lot of time around drinkers, and I think I need to do that. And my dad said to me, are you taking the piss? You know, what do you think you're doing? Like, you're coming on holiday with your family and you can't even devote that time to being with your family. You are a piss taker, basically. And I said, Dad, I understand that you feel that way, but that is what I need to do for myself. Otherwise, I won't be present at all. And basically, while I was there, I took all my literature with me, and I had my little meditations with me, and each day I'd do my like morning meditation on the beach, or sit on and have a read, you know, and do some little readings and things. And I remember my dad asking me, what is it you're doing, you know, and he started getting a little bit interested and having a little look. And then when I was going off to this meeting, he said to me, Michelle, do you mind if I come? I'm only coming because I want to make sure you're okay, you know. But we got there to this meeting, and it was a book reading, and we took it in turns around the room, reading a section from the book. Bearing in mind, my dad's like, he's a businessman, he's not really an emotional kind of guy. He got to the point where we're sharing back on the reading, and it was amazing. He turned around, he was like, I know why my daughter comes to these meetings now. I've just read me in that book, and it was incredible. And he said like he was proud of me. And when we was on in the taxi on the way back, he said, Michelle, I've just had a spiritual awakening. So it was really good, and I went off, and it was a beautiful holiday, but I felt really like I was just consuming all this stuff. It's all this expensive food and luxury items, and I felt really like I was just consuming. So for me, like, something that feeds my spirit is helping others. And I really had this overwhelming feeling to go and like help out while I was out there with the homeless. My dad came with me to go and do that, and he had a really like lovely experience, and he doesn't ever normally do stuff like that, and he said it really humbled him, and like, so me and my dad really connected during that holiday, and I did with the rest of my family as well, and I was able to, for the first time, to babysit my nephews overnight and all that sort of stuff, and I think for me that was where in my recovery I realised this is the way of life that I really want. This is what I've been looking for all my life, and I've never been able to have because I don't know how to be around my family. I feel fully accepted by my family now, and I'm able to be present for them as well as still do right for myself. And I've really enjoyed that holiday, and I realised that the way of life that I had been leading for the previous year in recovery wasn't fully true to my own nature, and I needed to change a few things. And when I got back from Jamaica, I moved over to be closer to my recovery network and broke off with that guy, and broke off from all them old behaviours like that, working in the hairdressers and all that stuff, and my life has just completely done like a 360, and I've carried on doing all them suggestions, and over time things have gradually improved, and I feel like this time, instead of saying, right, that's my goal, I want it today, it's been like bit by bit as I'm able to have it and actually really enjoy it for what it really is, and feel like I'm worthy of that.
Progressive recovery.
Yes.
Yeah. And you've got what you just said there is you've got to love yourself first before you can be there for other people as well, haven't you? If you don't take care of yourself, you can't do anything for anybody else anyway.
Absolutely.
And what does life in recovery mean to you then?
Wow. So it's most definitely being connected. Like for me, connection is something that without that I don't have a purpose, I don't have any reason to live, don't really have any drive. So like for me, life in recovery definitely needs to have connection, however that comes, because it comes in so many different forms.
I'm really glad you said that, because it's been like all the way through what you were sharing, that's exactly what, if I had to pick a word that you'd have used to say what you thought it was, connection is the word, because I just thought all the way through it was like that was what it was centered on. And it's totally the same for me as well. I said that in a meeting not that long ago, that it's just that exactly what you said, connection with yourself, connection with others, and connection with a higher power. And that is the be all and end all for me.
It is for me, and I know that looking back, everything I've ever tried has probably been for that connection, but I've not quite found the right plug socket. You know. And so it's that is really probably what recovery is, and it does change. Like I think as time's gone on, in a line with like the steps and the traditions and everything else, like I've just got my own place to live. So like have it been fully self-supporting. So even when I had my own business, I wasn't really fully self-supporting. Like I lived with my partner, and you know, like there was lots of different things, and so like having that fully self-supporting, and I've noticed when I am in line with the step work and the traditions to what I understand them to be, I feel better in myself. And as soon as I go off track of them things, that's when that disease creeps in. Yeah.
And if you had one thing that you could say to anybody listening that was struggling, what would you say?
I would say reach out and ask for help. And you know, keep trying, like keep coming back and keep going to the meetings, or asking for guidance off others that have been through similar situations. Like anything and everything that's happened to me in my whole life and in recovery, what I've noticed in the rooms is that no person has done something and not got identification. Do you know what I mean? Like there's always somebody.
There's a value to everything that you've experienced.
Yes. So any person that comes into them rooms will be able to help another or get help.
Yeah.
Because we've all had similar, if not the same, experiences in one form or another.
Absolutely.
So
yeah.
them predecessors or them other people have been through it before.
Yeah.
Like, use them.
And that's where the honesty comes in as well, isn't it? Because
Yeah.
if you don't share honestly about what you have been through, then how can we help anybody else? And I really appreciate your honesty today. It was amazing.
Thank you.
Thanks
Thank
very
you for
much.
asking me.
That was brilliant. I really
Yeah.
enjoyed it.